Well, one of the things I really like about living in the United States is that we have a holiday specifically for giving thanks. There's something just right about that. I didn't grow up with that, and there is no equivalent to that in the UK. And it strikes me as especially valuable and important the more that our culture has become filled with some of the opposites, right? Like whining and complaining and jealousy and entitlement. I think Thanksgiving gives us a reminder and a chance to have a reset, doesn't it? Just to step back and go, how am I doing? Am I thankful? Am I grateful? Now, perhaps giving thanks comes naturally to you, but I found that sometimes I have to work at it. Sometimes I don't find it easy. Sometimes I have to push myself a little bit. Sometimes I'm far more in touch with the reasons to be grumpy than the reasons to be thankful. Anybody ever get there on occasion? Sometimes the irritations of my life stack up and become my focus. Maybe you have some of those days too. And I found that one of the most helpful parts of the Bible during those times is the book of Psalms. The Psalms are unusually honest prayers that were often put to music and sung as a congregation. Pastor Paul Manwaring suggests that sometimes we have to read the Psalms until we find our own voice. To simply pick up the book and start reading and keep on reading until the words on the page sound like the words in your own heart. Because somewhere in those 150 chapters, you'll find yourself. Whatever point of life you're at, whatever you're facing, you will find yourself and you will find words that fit the moment that you're in. Especially when you're going through difficulty or trial or testing. I also like what one author called Kathleen Norris wrote. She says, the Psalms stop us from trying to be holy without being human first. You ever try to do that? You ever just try to play the game, step into that persona? They invite us out of pretense and back into reality. That's the main reason why we read a psalm almost every week here at Destiny. Because if you're like me, you occasionally have weeks where at the beginning of the service at least, you don't really want to be here. Anyone ever have times you think, I could have just laid in bed this morning? Or I could have stayed home and watched a game. I've been there too. And one of the things about coming to church week in, week out, that lady I just quoted, Kathleen Norris, knows that she spent some time while she was writing, living in a monastery. And just going and participating in some of the services. And she said, the thing is, if you start going to church, to a worship service multiple times in the week, sometimes multiple times in a day, you're not always in a good place. You don't have time to get your act together and go, okay, I'm going to get everything straightened out and then I'm going to go. Or I'm going to skip a week because I'm not in a good place and then I'm going to go, right? Because you're going, whether you're in a good mood, a bad mood, whether you're ready, whether you've sorted your hair out, whether, all of the stuff. And there's something about that that brings some reality to our walk with God. Because he knows us in all of those other times as well. So as I see it, the Psalms are like a bus stop. They're like a second invitation for us to get on board. And sometimes I need that second invitation. Most weeks I don't. Most weeks I'm ready to worship the Lord as soon as I arrive. But sometimes that little bit of honesty, that extra encouragement helps me from going through the motions to actively engaging with the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Sometimes I need that little bit of reality, that little bit of encouragement from someone else. Because so many of the Psalms are filled, aren't they, with that language. Come on, come worship the Lord with me. Let's exalt his name together, that kind of thing. And I need to hear that at times. So I'd like to just briefly unpack one of the Psalms this morning. It's a short one. It's Psalm 100. It's a psalm that's specifically titled a Psalm of Thanksgiving or a Psalm for giving thanks. Psalm 100. If you have a Bible, feel free to turn there. If you don't, we have some spares over on the table towards the back. Feel free to borrow one if you'd like. But Psalm 100. Psalm 100 in the ESV says, his steadfast love endures forever, a psalm for giving thanks. And it goes like this. Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come into his presence with singing. Know that the Lord, he is God. It is he who made us, and we are his. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him. Bless his name, for the Lord is good. His steadfast love endures forever, and his faithfulness to all generations. The first thing that strikes me about this psalm are all the verbs, all the action words. Make, serve, come, enter, give, bless. Clearly there's an act of the will involved in worship and praise and thanksgiving. Often when we're not in a good place, the easiest thing to do is just to be passive, right? To be silent, to do nothing, or perhaps even to sulk. How many of you had God ruin a good sulk? You want to have a sulk, you want to have a pity party, and then he just starts doing nice things to you, and you're like, oh, you are so spoiling this. But when we do those things, we only prolong our stay in that less than great place where we find ourselves. So we have a choice. We must engage our will and take that first step. And one of the things I've heard people say over the years is, I'm not going to give thanks because that would be fake or hypocritical, and I want to be real. And that sounds really, spiritual, authentic or whatever, but actually it's a bunch of hooey. It's just not true. It's not true. It's fundamentally flawed, even though we've all thought that way at times, because it makes our circumstances and our feelings the ultimate reality, and they're not. Your circumstances, your feelings are not the ultimate reality. At least some of the time, faith means acknowledging a higher reality, a bigger picture than the one we're currently experiencing. It's not denying what we're experiencing and pretending it's not happening. I'm not talking about that. I don't believe in that either. It's not denying what we're experiencing. It's simply saying, this is not all there is to it. There's more to this story, and the final paragraphs haven't been written yet. It's refusing to park the bus in the bad places of life and moving into a different place. I love the line sometimes people say, if you're going through hell, keep going. If you're going through hell, run. Or better yet, if you want to be like Jesus, if you're going through hell, take other people out of it with you. That's what he did. So faith is acknowledging realities that we can't see and sometimes don't feel. There's nothing fake about that. That's just choosing to say, this is not all there is. And the Psalms often make that journey, don't they, from feelings to faith. Many of them start out with anxiety or anger or depression or frustration. But then they make their way to a better place. That's why they're so helpful to us, because you know what? We often start in those same places, don't we? Angry and frustrated and anxious and depressed and all of that stuff. And so we need somebody who shows us the path and goes, actually, if you just go up there a little bit, take a right and then another left, you'll find your way out. And we need that. The next thing that leaps out at me is joy. Listen to those first two verses again. Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come into his presence with singing. It tells us something, doesn't it, when joy goes missing? It tells us there's a problem. And this psalm was specifically describing the children of Israel coming to worship at the temple. Or in our setting, you and I coming to church to worship. And we gradually, when we came here this morning, we had to get up and then get dressed and then get in the car and then drive here and then get out of the car and then come through the front door. We had to go through this process. It's talking about the same thing. Talking about the process of getting closer. You could right now just be sat in your car outside. You could have come all the way from where you live to the parking lot, but never actually cross the threshold and enter into worship. And sometimes we do that in our hearts, don't we? We make it all the way here, but we never actually engage. We just go through the outward motions. And if that's where you're at today, I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying there's a better way. We've all been there. But when joy is missing, it tells us there's a problem. Verse 3 says, know that the Lord, he is God. It is he who made us, and we are his. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. See, worship always, always, always is tied to knowing God, to him making himself known to us. When our worship is lacking, it's because we're living off yesterday's revelation. It's where we're stagnant in what we've come to know and understand about God. As soon as we're stagnant, our worship begins to dry up. Why? Because we're not seeing anything new. We're not seeing anything new. The more we know him, the more we worship and the more we give thanks. You can't help it. You can't help it. And there's actually quite a lot being said in this verse. The Lord, he is God. It's our God who is God alone. He's not one of many, but the one and only. He's our creator. He made us. Elsewhere in the Old Testament, of course, it has the language around creation of a potter making something, molding and shaping the clay. And that's one of the ways that God relates to us. He molds us and he shapes us. Aren't you glad God doesn't knock the edges off you like people do? I mean, a potter makes things soft first. Then he shapes it. Other people gladly take a hammer to you. It's not how God works. He softens us up. He melts us with his love, and then he begins to reshape us, because that's how good he is. We belong to him. We're his. We are his people. We are his sheep. Everyone wants a place to belong and someone to belong to. Everyone. It's one of the most basic needs of the human heart. We want to belong. We want to belong somewhere and to someone. And what better place than the arms of our Father? What better place than in the arms of a loving God? There's one line in one of Jonathan David Helser's songs that goes like this: grace is the collision on the way back home with the arms of a father who won't let go. I love that. Grace is the collision on the way back home with the arms of a father who won't let go. He's our shepherd. He protects us. He provides for us. He tenderly cares for us, and he leads us. See, as we've started to make the journey into worship, more and more reasons for pressing in become clear to us. The closer we get, the clearer things become. There's several Psalms that talk about that. Psalm 73 in particular is one like that, where the guy says, I was really mad at you, God, until I came into your house. And then things began to become more apparent to me about what reality really is. Verse 4, enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him, bless his name. So we push on and we enter in, and we enter in through thanksgiving. Well, let me say that a different way. Doors will open to you when you give thanks. Doors will open to you when you give thanks. Thanksgiving is the quickest way into the presence of God, and whining and complaining is the fastest way out of the presence of God. I like how the Message says this little bit. It says, enter with the password, thank you. Again, I mentioned it the other week, but if God is enthroned on the praises of his people, who gets enthroned on whining and complaining? Who would you rather have on the throne of your circumstances? It's worth thinking about. And how many of us like it when someone says, thank you, and they really mean it? They really mean it. I mean, all of us do. And our Father's no different. And the thing is, sometimes when we say a heartfelt thank you, it predisposes somebody to do more, doesn't it? Someone comes to you and they say, oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me over for dinner. I really appreciate that. And you think, oh, I'll invite them again, right? Something shifts in us when people respond in a healthy way with giving thanks. And our Father's no different. And again, don't misunderstand me. I'm not suggesting to you that you can flatter or manipulate God and sucker him into doing something by spouting off a bunch of words. I'm not talking about that at all. He's far more discerning than that. I'm just saying that when we truly appreciate a gift, it often causes him to give us more. It's interesting, there's actually no word in Hebrew for to give thanks. The word we translate as give thanks more literally means this: to praise or give public acknowledgement. In other words, to tell others what God has done, to declare his name and his reputation. So here's the point. It can't be silent. It can't even be private. When we give thanks to God, we do so to someone else, with someone else present, with someone else witnessing it. We give thanks to God before others. We bless his name. Why? Because ultimately it comes down to this last verse, verse 5. For the Lord is good. His steadfast love endures forever, and his faithfulness to all generations. Our Father is good. He's not just good some of the time, he's good all of the time. I think so many Christians think God is only good when they're good. He's good when you've had your quiet time. He's good when you've showed up for church. He's good when you've behaved yourself. But when you haven't, then we think he's not good. That's where a lot of us live. But God is good all the time. Because goodness is his very nature. In fact, it's impossible for him to be anything other than good. He doesn't do that flip-flop thing like we do. Well, we can be good and then we can... Then it says, his love is steadfast. His love is steadfast and enduring. There's such security, isn't there, in those two words being put together, steadfast and love. It's like our Father is saying, you can't make me not love you. You can't make me not love you. It's just not going to happen. Do whatever you do, and I will still love you regardless, because my love is steadfast. It's anchored. It's settled. And his heart towards us is absolutely fixed. God has good in his heart for you today, and he'll have good in his heart for you tomorrow and the day after. And that's regardless of whether you mess it up and do 20 terrible things between now and then. He'll still have good in his heart for you every single day. And he's faithful to generation after generation. He's faithful to the young. He's faithful to the old. He's faithful to everyone in between. He was faithful in the past, and he will continue to be faithful in the future when we get there. And those are just a few reasons for giving him our thanks and our praise. So I just want to leave you with two quick questions before I ask Pastor Jean to come and share for a few minutes as well. Number one, what could you do to cultivate a rhythm of thanksgiving in your life? To cultivate a rhythm of thanksgiving in your life. Just punctuating your life by giving thanks. And two, how might that change you and the lives of those around you? If your life, if your existence was punctuated by thanksgiving all the time, what would that do to your relationships? What would that do to your heart? What would that do to your family? What would that do to the people you work with? You start to become an extremely thankful person. What sort of knock-on effects is that going to have? What could you do to cultivate a rhythm of thanksgiving in your life, and how might that change you and the lives of those around you? I know I haven't said anything particularly profound this morning, but there's something so deep about the simple things of just giving God thanks, of just coming back to saying, you know what? Thank you. Thank you that I get to live in this nation. Thank you that I have a car. Thank you that I have a house that's warm in the winter and cool in the summer. Thank you that we have windows and doors and locks. And thank you that we have clothes. And thank you that we have all this kind of stuff. Because most of the world would trade with us in a heartbeat, no questions asked. Traveled enough to know that. So let's be thankful for the little things. Because here's the thing that happens. As you're thankful about small stuff, you notice it more. As you begin to focus on what you're thankful for, you will see more that you can be thankful for, and you'll recognize it more quickly and more often. And as that grabs your attention and grabs your focus, it will save you from all the whining and complaining that's so easy to slip into. And it will remind you that it's God that's given you those good things. You're not a self-made man or a self-made woman. God set you up. He's responsible for both your first creation and your second, your being born again.